This is JD, the one and only. From time to time, we bring you stories that we find are interesting, stories that are educational and entertaining. Today, we've got a remarkable story to tell you by a remarkable woman. This is the story I've been chasing for many, many years. It's the story about a gentleman from St. Kitts called Nathaniel Wells. And today, be prepared. This is a special. First of all, thanks for having me
Thank you for coming.
and tell our audience where we are today.
So we're in Chepstow Museum in South Wales, and we're very near Piercefield, which has a particular position in the story.
Right. Now, this story starts in St. Kitts. So tell us about the early life of this gentleman called Nathaniel Wells.
Nathaniel was born the son of William Wells, who was by that time a plantation owner on St. Kitts, and he was the son of one of William's enslaved African housewomen, at that time called Juggy.
Juggy, right. Yes, yes. Now, I believe in your research, you actually went to St. Kitts to research this guy's life. But before that, his father sent him to England. Tell us a bit about his father sending him to England.
He was sent to England when he was just 9 years old.
Wow.
And the idea was that he would be educated, so to go to school, and then his father wanted him to go to Oxford.
Wow.
So really seriously educated. So he was sent to live with his uncle, who was also confusingly Nathaniel. So his uncle Nathaniel Wells, who had begun life in London as a coachmaker, but then by that time had become a West Indies merchant himself and was working with William on St. Kitts.
Wow. Now, in 1801, I believe he married a local girl. Tell us about his life in 1801 to 1802.
Well, in 1800, which is the important bit of how he gets the girl,
Wow.
in 1800 he had come into his inheritance because he was then 21. So his father had died in 1794 and leaving Nathaniel the bulk of his inheritance, in particular the plantations on St. Kitts and property on St. Kitts, together of course with all the enslaved people working them, and also quite a bit of money. He'd also left money to his other children, who were all girls, and were the children of other of his enslaved household. So, but they all had different mothers.
Okay.
So 1800 was a significant point in time for Nathaniel.
Right. His inheritance,
Comes
yeah.
21, can get his inheritance, and so he's then a young man with lots and lots of money, and less than a year later he's found himself a wife and married, and she is the daughter of a reverend in London, and a very attractive and pretty young woman.
Now, 1802, significant part of his life. He buys something, and it wasn't a bicycle. Tell me what he bought in 1802.
Well, he didn't have any property of his own. He hadn't inherited property in the UK. He had nothing. He was living in rented places in London, and they came to Bath and so on. So he needed somewhere for his family. But he doesn't buy an ordinary place.
No.
He buys a huge estate just outside Chepstow, which was already by that time quite a famous tourist attraction. This is Piercefield, the big estate, famous for its landscape walks, but the house had also been done up by another owner, so he's buying the finished article. He's buying this amazing landscape and a very beautiful, quite new house. So that's what he has, is his new home for his soon to be quite large family.
Good. Now, Is it 80,000 pounds he paid for it in 1802? Is that the correct figure, or is it around that?
It's 90.
90.
It's a
You see,
huge
I
amount of
told
money.
you we get the best researchers in the world, a world authority who can correct me. Not 80,000 as I thought, but 90,000.
90,000, yes.
Wow.
And that would have been, I mean, that's quite a huge chunk of his available cash fortune.
Yes, yes. Now, he held a few roles. He was a gentleman of leisure, one would imagine, but what were some of the civic societies and appointments that he had in his early part in Wales?
Right, well, as a country gentleman, which was in fact what he'd become by buying this big estate, I suppose there were things that it would be natural for him to take on if they were offered to him. One of the first things that came his way by way of an appointment was that of deputy lieutenant. And because Britain very soon went back to war with France, and they were important pawns in that game of militarization in case of invasion and that kind of thing. So he was one of 12 deputy lieutenants who the Lord Lieutenant appointed in 1803. So that was probably one of his first things. Then he also became church warden of St Alban's Church, and he also became very quickly a justice of the peace.
Wow.
And I think that's quite an interesting one, because obviously in St Kitts, if he had ever gone back to St Kitts, he couldn't have even sat on a jury, let alone sit in judgment, hear his passing judgment on people for their crimes and misdemeanours. And there he wouldn't even have been able to give evidence.
Wow. Now, 1818, significant part of his life. Tell us what happens to him in 1818.
1818, he's been nominated and he becomes elected as the High Sheriff, which is a post for 1 year, and it's the High Sheriff of the whole county.
Wow.
So it's the whole county of Monmouthshire, which at that time was a very, very large county. And while to a certain extent it's somewhat a more ceremonial role, it's to do with the courts and the assizes, it's also one where you would have had, or he did have, the ability to gather the gentry together, to send greetings or petitions or commiserations to the royal family if there was a death or things like that. So it was quite a role that was a position that had authority.
Wow.
And he was very respected in that role.
Yeah. Now, part of the description of High Sheriff, it says he administers justice on behalf of the king. So does that mean he was able to put charges onto people? Was he able to do that?
Not so much as High Sheriff, but obviously as a JP he was administering justice in that way a lot of the time. But he worked with the assize court. It was a role within the assizes, which were the sessions that were held in Monmouth at that time.
Wow, interesting. Now, this is where it gets very tricky and interesting. The British decides to pay 20 million to the slave owners, recompensation of the emancipation. And get this, Nathaniel Wells, who had slaves of his own, benefits, and I believe he was paid £1,400 for his slaves, or about that amount.
I think it's a bit less
than that.
By that time, he had actually, in the 1820s, he began to sell his plantations.
So to sell, okay.
And which may have been at things weren't obviously the fortunes of those plantations were not as good as they had been in earlier years for various reasons, but perhaps also because his second wife came from a background of abolitionist ideas, and she might just have been influencing her husband to divest himself
Okay.
of his plantations and the enslaved people on them. But still, by 1833, he still owned one.
He owned one slave only.
One plantation.
One plantation.
One plantation.
One plantation, not one slave. Let's get that right.
But they had been leased out, his
Okay.
plantations, so they were. He was slightly removed until he got the ownership back from those, but they were all on lease and had
Okay.
managers at that point.
Now, one of the
Doesn't
intriguing...
make it any better for the
Okay,
people on the
no.
plantations. but-
Because one thing that intrigues me is that his father William had slaves. Nathaniel had slaves. I believe his sister also inherited slaves, had her own slaves as well. These were black people. Nathaniel was black, by the way. His sister was mixed race, I believe. And they held slaves at the time. Interesting, isn't it?
Yes, but I think, and his mother, once she became free and had her own property, she had enslaved black people as her servants.
Wow.
But that seems to be within the society at the time, that if you were a free black, or that in a way you sort of cemented your status in society within that whole slave-owning society by owning enslaved people yourself.
Yes.
It's difficult for us to even
And comprehend, yes.
that.
Yes.
And I think Nathaniel's half-sister she did free some of her enslaved people beforehand. Nathaniel, when he had come into his inheritance, he gave freedom to about 5 people, all of whom seemed to be relatives of his mother in some way. But no way did he make sort of mass manumissions or anything like that. I mean, it didn't seem to be something, they were part and parcel of the plantation, I guess, and that's how he would have thought of them himself.
Wow. Now, you've done all of the research. I'm going to ask you 2 quick questions.
Okay.
One, when is the book coming out? Number 1. Number 2, when you do the film version, who's going to play Nathaniel? Denzel, there's a job coming up for you there. And how would you sum up the life of this remarkable man? Because by all accounts, even by today's standards, he was a remarkable man for the times.
Yes, I think it must have been an interesting situation for him to be in. And one of the things we haven't said was he had a big family. He ended
How many children did he have?
He had 23 children, 10 by his first wife, 13 by his second. Wow. But sadly, very, very sadly, 14 of those children predeceased him.
Wow.
And from those adult children, there weren't a lot of them who went on to have children of their own.
Yes.
We don't know how many. I mean, obviously a lot of those children were mixed race themselves, and some of them, we don't know what happened beyond that, or we know some. I know some of the descendants today from around the world.
Wow.
So,
and this cut all over the world is the
yes.
Really?
Some of the descendants are all over the world. So
all over the world.
But I think he would have obviously stood out. He would have. I think that he took the opportunities that he could. For some of them would have come automatically with his situation as a wealthy country gentleman. He had education. He was obviously very gentlemanly. That's one of the things that people say about him. But I think he was happy to take on the roles and responsibilities. It seems to be something that he did kind of take on in a positive way. So those roles and responsibilities that he couldn't have held if he'd gone back to St. Kitts.
That is true.
I think were an important part of his life over here, and something that he was glad to do.
Well, folks, you've heard it, the story of Nathaniel Wells, told by the person who've done the most research on his life. She can even go back to his great-great-grandfathers and all of that. So once again, J.D. Douglas, the man from Walcott Country, where the language is dialect and poetry, and thank you a lot.
Thank you.